You've probably said it yourself or had it said to you in a week that wouldn't let up. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It lives on gym walls and graduation cards, under photographs of mountains at sunrise, in pop songs and on the inside of people's wrists. It has been flattened into a slogan for pushing through the last set at the gym, which is about as far from its original home as a sentence can travel. It may be the most repeated sentence philosophy has ever produced. And here you are, late, the day behind you and the room gone quiet, which happens to be the kind of hour the man who wrote that sentence knew far too well. He barely slept for most of his life. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche, and almost nothing you picture when you hear that name survives contact with the real one. The poster version is a kind of warrior, hard and cold, contemptuous of weakness, a prophet of power who tells you to toughen up and quit complaining. The actual man was a small, courteous, half-blind professor who was ill nearly every day of his adult life. Migraines that shut him in a dark room for days at a stretch, eyesight so poor he could barely read his own handwriting, a stomach that turned on him without warning. He left his career at 34 and spent the next 10 years as a man with no country, climbing the paths above a village in the Alps, sometimes for 8 hours at a time, composing his sentences in his head because his eyes could no longer hold a page. He published his greatest books to almost no one and died without ever knowing the world would come to read him at all. So when the poster promises that suffering makes you stronger, it's worth knowing that the man behind it suffered enormously and was never quite sure it had made him anything but tired. By the accounts of people who actually knew him, he was gentle, almost comically polite, and quick, above all, to laugh at himself. The thunder is real, but it's all on the page. What keeps pulling me back to him, after years, is something simpler than the ideas. A person and their reputation are two different things. You are one object. The story told about you is another, and a reputation, unlike a person, can be edited. It can be cut apart, rearranged, and signed in your name long after you've lost the power to object. His was. The version of Nietzsche that most of the 20th century believed in, the one that ended up serving a regime he would have despised, was, in part, a forgery, assembled after his death by someone in his own family who loved him and shared almost none of his convictions. By then, the man himself had been silent for years and could not read a single word of what was being done in his name. Most of this isn't really daytime thinking. In the full noise of an ordinary afternoon, a question like, who was this person, actually slides off without much trouble. It's here, in the quiet, with the lamp turned lower than it needs to be and the rest of the house asleep, that the distance between a man and his legend stops feeling like trivia and starts feeling closer to the bone, because every one of us is carrying a version of ourselves that other people wrote, and most of us will never get the chance to correct it. One small thing before we go on. If a film like this is worth making to you, the subscribe button helps more than almost anything else, and it costs you nothing at all. And I'd honestly like to know somewhere down in the comments, what's the one line of his you've heard most often? And did you ever really know where it came from? I read the answers. It turns out that question is the whole story in miniature. So settle in and let your shoulders come down from wherever they've drifted up to. None of this is in a hurry. Let's start where almost nobody does, with that one famous sentence, the real one, set back in the place he actually wrote it, because he did write it, and he did not mean what the poster thinks he meant. We treat it as a promise, which is the first odd thing about it once you slow down enough to notice. A sentence we repeat like a law of nature is really being heard as a guarantee that whatever doesn't finish you off leaves you stronger than it found you, that the bad thing is secretly an investment, that the wound, given time, pays interest. It's one of the gentlest ideas a person can carry into a hard season, and almost nobody who reaches for it has ever seen the page it came from. The page is in a book Nietzsche wrote in the late summer of 1888, Fast, in a kind of white heat that seems to have half frightened him. He called it Twilight of the Idols and gave it a subtitle that tells you the mood he was in, How to Philosophize with a Hammer. It opens with a run of 44 short, hard sayings he named maxims and arrows. And they really are arrows, filed to a point, built to fly past you and lodge somewhere behind the ribs an hour later. The 8th one is the line you know, but it doesn't stand alone the way it does on the wall. It opens with a clause the poster always leaves off, from the military school of life, and only then arrives at the words you recognize. That little clause is not decoration. An aphorism is a thought compressed down to a spark. Its whole art is to say less than it means and trust you to do the rest of the burning. So when Nietzsche files this one under the discipline of a soldier, the school of war, he isn't describing the bounce back we picture, the one where you take a few weeks, feel your feelings, and come back to your life with firmer boundaries. He means something colder and far more demanding. A forging, a training paid for in real damage. The kind of strength most people very sensibly never sign up for. And there's a smaller theft tucked inside the famous version, one almost nobody notices. He didn't write you, he wrote me. What does not kill me makes me stronger. The poster swapped one pronoun for the other, and in that single swap, it turned a private, blood-bought boast about one man's own ruin into a cheerful law that's supposed to cover everybody. Here is where the popular accounts tend to stop, right at the flattering part, the part that fits on a wall. They rarely go on to the obvious problem, which Nietzsche saw more clearly than anyone who has ever quoted him. Most suffering does not make people stronger. Most of it makes them smaller. He spent years on precisely this, on the way pain, badly met, curdles into resentment, into bitterness, into a soul that grows meaner the more it is hurt. He had a whole vocabulary for the harm that suffering does to people. The line was never a law that covers the world. It was a description of a rare and difficult relationship a certain kind of person manages to have with their own ordeal, and even for them, only sometimes. The man writing it was, as he wrote, about as physically broken as a person can be and still hold a pen. And this is the part that should stop us. Within a few months of finishing that bright, hammering little book, the illness he had been outrunning for 20 years closed over him for good, took his mind, and never gave it back. If the sentence is a promise, it is a promise his own life did not keep. He is the worst imaginable advertisement for his most quoted line, which leaves only two possibilities: that he didn't believe it, or that he meant something the wall version simply cannot hold. You probably already sense which, because you have stood on the other side of this sentence. Somewhere in your life there was a loss that did not enrich you, a grief that only hollowed out a season, an illness that took something and handed nothing back, a betrayal whose single lesson was that it had happened, and at some point, while you were still inside it, someone who loved you said the thing, what doesn't kill you, and they said it to be kind. Some part of you, grateful for the kindness, still went quietly cold because you knew that what was happening to you was not making you stronger, it was only costing you. In that moment, the slogan felt less like comfort than like a small request, that you please hurry and convert your pain into something inspiring so the people around you wouldn't have to look at it while it was still raw. That cold feeling is worth trusting. It sits closer to Nietzsche than the poster does. He had no interest in making suffering go down easy. He found that whole enterprise faintly cowardly. What he wanted to understand was harder and stranger, what a person actually becomes in the presence of pain that has no payoff at all. That is the question hiding under the question, and the version on the wall is built very carefully to help us never have to ask it. It's worth sitting with how little it takes to turn him into someone he wasn't. The poster does it gently, almost fondly. It rounds off the hard edges, keeps the part that flatters us, and lets the rest fall away. That is a tiny misreading, and it costs nothing at all, but it is the same move in miniature that would one day be performed on him at a far larger scale and to far darker ends. the trick of keeping the strong-sounding words and quietly dropping everything that complicates them. He is one of the easiest thinkers alive to misquote, precisely because he wrote in sparks, and a spark can be carried off in whatever direction the wind happens to be blowing. Someone eventually carried his somewhere monstrous, and the unsettling thing, the thing worth holding onto here in the dark, is how short the distance turns out to be between the pillow and the catastrophe. So the honest question was probably never the one the sentence pretends to answer. We already know, if we let ourselves, whether hardship reliably makes us stronger. We've buried that answer at enough funerals. The quieter question is the one we tend to flinch from. What were we hoping that sentence would let us off the hook for? Our own pain, that we'd rather not feel all the way to the bottom? Or someone else's, that we'd rather not have to sit beside? Notice it the next time it happens. The next time the words rise up in you, ready to be offered to someone in the thick of it, and you get that half second in which you can choose whether to reach for them or to simply stay. You don't have to settle any of it tonight. Notice only that your body already has a view, the slight tightening somewhere in the chest when the slogan is laid over real grief, the part of you that won't quite salute. Let that be enough. Let the breath lengthen and the question stay open, because it isn't going anywhere, and neither for the moment is he, the half-blind man on the mountain path, writing about strength with a body that could barely carry him to the top of the hill. Come up onto the path with him for a moment, before any of the ideas. A footpath in the Swiss Alps, early in the 1880s, a bright summer morning, a lake lying below the colour of cold slate. The man a few steps ahead of you is not what the books would lead you to expect. He's slight, and he walks with the careful, slightly braced movement of someone for whom daylight itself is a difficulty, flinching a little at the glare coming off the water. Every so often he stops, lifts a small notebook almost to the tip of his nose, because at any greater distance the page simply dissolves into grey, and writes a few quick words before walking on. He will keep this up for hours. Something in the altitude and the motion and the thin gold light lets him think in a way that rooms never have. And here is the quiet shock of it. The sentences this man is scribbling into that notebook, fast before they can escape him, are among the most violent and grand in the history of writing. Sentences that pronounce God dead and the old moral order finished, that calmly propose to overturn 3,000 years of human values and seem entirely capable of doing it. On the page, the voice is colossal. It could fill a cathedral or bring one down, and it is coming out of a body that can barely get itself up the hill. By every account left to us by people who actually sat across a table from him, the owner of that voice was small, soft-spoken, and sweet-natured. The sort of man who fretted aloud about whether he had inconvenienced his landlady. The size of the voice and the size of the life had nothing whatever to do with each other. So how does a gentle, failing man end up out here, alone on a mountain, writing things that will outlast the empires of his century? The beginning is almost a fairy tale, which is part of what makes the rest so hard to watch. He was born into a long line of Lutheran pastors in a quiet village in what was then Prussia, and his father, a country minister, gentle himself by every account, died when Friedrich was 4. The doctors called it a disease of the brain, though they understood very little of what they were naming. It is one of those facts that only turns cruel in hindsight. The boy who lost his father to a failing brain would, 40 years later, lose his own mind to one as well. He grew up after that in a household made entirely of women, his mother, his sister, a grandmother, 2 aunts, the bright and delicate hope of a family that had run out of men. And he was bright well past the point of comfort. Sent to one of the most punishing boarding schools in Germany, he emerged a prodigy in a discipline called philology, the close, patient study of ancient languages and texts, the slow craft of getting long-dead words exactly right. He was so good at it that the University of Basel in Switzerland handed him a full professorship at the age of 24, younger than almost anyone before him, while his old university awarded the doctorate without troubling to examine him on the grounds that his published work had already settled the matter. For one bright moment, the whole world arranged itself at his feet, and then the body began, slowly, to take it all back. It seems to have started in the autumn of 1870. A war had broken out between France and Prussia, and Nietzsche, who could not serve as a soldier but would not sit it out, spent a few weeks as a medical orderly tending the wounded and the dying in field hospitals, and came home carrying dysentery and diphtheria that he never fully set down. From there, it was a long unraveling. The headaches that buried him for days, the eyes that kept dimming, the stomach that turned against him. In his mid-30s, he could no longer stand at a lectern, and he let the professorship go. He did not so much resign a post as resign the only kind of life that had ever fit him, the library, the lecture hall, the company of other scholars, and walk out, sick and unanchored, into nothing in particular. One fact says almost everything about the shape of what came next. When he had taken the chair at Basel, he gave up his Prussian citizenship, and he never took a Swiss one in its place. For the rest of his life, he belonged on paper to no country on earth, a stateless man crossing borders that made no claim on him, writing for a readership that did not yet exist. What followed was a decade of boarding houses, cheap rooms in northern Italy and the Swiss mountains, chosen for whatever climate his body could briefly bear, abandoned the moment it couldn't. The walk became his real place of work. The desk was nearly an afterthought, and when his eyes failed past the point of reading at all, he bought a machine to keep going, one of the first typewriters ever built, a Danish contraption called a writing ball, a brass sphere bristling with keys like something designed for a creature that types with its whole hand at once. He could work it nearly blind, and using it, he noticed something and set it down in a letter to a friend. "Our writing tools," he wrote, "are also working on our thoughts." He could feel the machine altering his prose, pressing it shorter and harder into something more like a sequence of struck blows. The aphorism, that compressed little spark, was partly a style and partly an injury, the shape a failing body pressed his thinking into. How do we know any of this, though? The notebook held to his nose, the worry about the landlady, the feel of those keys under his fingers. We know because he was one of the great letter writers of his age, spending himself on the page to the handful of people who loved him, and because those people kept what he sent. We know because the notebooks survived, every false start and second thought intact. We have an almost intrusive intimacy with a man who spent nearly his entire life unwatched, which is its own small irony, that someone so alone should end up so completely recorded. And what the record keeps showing, page after page, is tenderness, the very last thing the legend would have you expect. The man the coming century would dress up as a prophet of hardness, an icon of domination and contempt, was in person the one who held the door, who lay awake, wondering if he'd been rude, who signed his letters with an almost childlike warmth. You may know that gap yourself, in a smaller key, the distance between the version of you that other people meet and the person you actually are once the performing stops. His gap was only unusually wide, and the world, when it finally turned to look, chose to keep the loud half and throw the rest away. There's a question that hovers over a life like this, and the temptation is to want it solved. Did the suffering make him? Could anyone have reached thoughts that far past the edge of the ordinary without a body and a loneliness that had already shoved them past the edge of everything else? You can feel how badly the mind wants a verdict. That genius must have the wound, or that the wound only robbed him and the genius came in spite of it. It isn't that kind of question. It doesn't resolve. It's one of the ones you carry the way you carry the memory of a face. And if you're going to carry him, this is the right hour for it. Sleep came hard to him all his life. The questions he could outrun by daylight tended to catch him after dark, in some rented room with the lamp turned low and the village gone silent around him, which is not so far from where you are now. At the edge of sleep, with the day's defences down, you are closer to him than the waking world will ever quite let you be. This hour was his country. He knew it better than almost anyone alive, though the silence was not always his. Long before the mountains, before the illness took the life that fit him, that quiet had been full, crowded even, with two voices that, between them, set the course of everything afterward. One belonged to a philosopher already dead, whom he found by accident in a bookshop and who showed him how far down honesty could go. The other belonged to a living, overwhelming, impossible man, a composer who became the closest friend Nietzsche would ever have, and then the deepest wound of his life. The dead philosopher came first, and he came in a book. It was 1865, in a bookshop in Leipzig, and Nietzsche was 20, a student, brilliant, restless, and recently, quietly done with the God he had been raised to believe in. He picked up a heavy volume by a writer almost no one was reading anymore, a difficult old pessimist named Arthur Schopenhauer, dead only a few years, and he opened it, and something in him went still. He carried it back to his room and read it the way you'd read a letter that had been lost for years and finally found you, as if a voice had been waiting in those pages for exactly his ears. What Schopenhauer offered was not comfort. It was the opposite of comfort, and that was the whole of its appeal. The world, he argued, is driven from underneath by a single blind force, a restless, ceaseless wanting that he simply called the will. It's in the gravity that pulls a stone, in the root that splits rock to reach water, in the hunger of an animal, in you. And because wanting can never be finished, satisfy one desire and a fresh one stands up in its place. To be alive is to suffer, more or less without pause, swinging between the ache of want and the boredom of having. No God arranges any of it. There is only the will pushing itself forward forever through us for no reason at all. And what do you do with a truth like that? Schopenhauer's answer was to stop, to starve the wanting, to turn down the volume of desire until the will goes quiet in you, through art, through pity for other suffering things, and finally through a serene renunciation he had borrowed, openly and with admiration, from the sages of India and the Buddhists. The wise reply to a world of endless craving was to crave less and less until you had almost stepped off the wheel, to say gently and finally, no to wanting, no to striving, very nearly in the end, no to living at all. For a young man who had just let go of heaven and found the world gone suddenly empty, this was thrilling, not because it was hopeful, but because it was honest. Here at last was someone who looked straight at a world with no God in it and refused to flinch or sweeten what he saw. Nietzsche had found his first master, and he would spend the next decade slowly, painfully discovering that his master had the diagnosis exactly right and the cure exactly wrong. The second voice was not on a page. It was a man, and the man was almost more than Nietzsche could survive. In 1868, he met Richard Wagner, VH Gina, the most famous, most overwhelming artist in Europe, a composer of enormous, engulfing operas who carried himself like a force of nature that had decided to put on a coat. Wagner was 30 years older, a devout reader of Schopenhauer himself, and he took the brilliant young professor up almost as a son. For a few years, Nietzsche all but lived inside Wagner's household, a villa on the shore of a Swiss lake, coming and going, running errands, talking deep into the night. He called those the happiest days of his life, and there's no reason to doubt him. What Wagner gave him was a kind of living proof. Schopenhauer had said the world was suffering and the only sane response was to want less of it. But here was Wagner, making art out of the suffering, vast, dark, ecstatic music that didn't deny the terror of existence so much as transfigure it until you wanted to rise up inside it rather than lie down. Nietzsche poured all of this into his first book, a strange and beautiful thing called The Birth of Tragedy. The ancient Greeks, he argued, had understood something we have forgotten, and they had built it into their tragedies out of two opposing powers, each named for one of their gods. There was Apollo, light, form, the clear and shapely dream, the power that gives us beautiful images and lets us see the world as ordered and bearable. And there was Dionysus, Dionysus, wine and music and ecstasy, the power that dissolves all those tidy boundaries, the boundary around the self included, and pulls you down into something older and wilder and shared. Apollo makes you an individual. Dionysus, for a few unbearable and glorious moments, melts you back into the whole. True tragedy, he said, needs both. The beautiful Apollonian shape to make the Dionysian truth survivable, the way a frame lets you look at something you couldn't stand to see bare. But it was the wild half that lit Nietzsche up, because folded inside it was an answer to Schopenhauer he could feel long before he could argue it. You could stand at the very edge Schopenhauer stood at, the suffering, the meaninglessness, the missing God, and instead of turning from life, you could turn toward it and say yes. Yes to the whole of it, the agony included, not because the agony is secretly good for you, but because it is part of the single wild, astonishing fact there is, which is being alive at all. That yes, tragic, clear-eyed, with no comfort smuggled in, is the seed of everything Nietzsche would ever become. It is the exact reverse of Schopenhauer's gnome, and he found it first in the sound of his friend's music. To become himself, though, he would have to leave them both, and leaving the dead philosopher was the easy half. He kept Schopenhauer's honesty and let the despair fall away. You can outgrow a book without it ever knowing. Leaving Wagner was something else entirely. The break, when it came, was slow and then complete, and it ran along several wounds at once. Wagner, swelling into his fame, was curdling into things Nietzsche couldn't stomach. A loud German nationalism, an uglier and uglier anti-Semitism, a sense of himself as the very voice of the German soul. And then came his last opera, Parsifal, drenched in Christian holiness, the Holy Grail, the wound that heals, redemption kneeling at the foot of the cross. To Nietzsche, it was a surrender of everything the music had once promised. The man who was meant to herald a new, earthbound, life-loving art had sunk to his knees before the very religion Nietzsche believed the world was finally done with. This is worth pausing on, because it is the precise reverse of the legend, the first great public break of Nietzsche's life, the one that cost him his dearest friend, was a turn away from German nationalism and anti-Semitism, not toward them. The man a later century would conscript as the philosopher of the master race walked away from the most powerful artist in Europe, partly because that artist had become a nationalist and a hater of Jews. He saw it early, named it plainly, and paid for the seeing with the warmest friendship he would ever have. And here is the part that rarely makes the textbooks, because it isn't an idea, it's a grief. Wagner had been almost a father to him, and Nietzsche never replaced him, never again had a friendship that warm or that total. For the rest of his life, he kept circling back to Wagner on the page, attacking him, mocking him, and underneath it all, plainly still loving him, the way you go on arguing with someone precisely because you can't let them go. You may know the shape of this from inside your own life. There is usually a teacher, a hero, a faith, a person whose world you lived in until the day it became clear that staying would mean never becoming yourself, and that to go on, you would have to disappoint them, or leave them, or quietly stop believing the thing that had once held you together. It is one of the loneliest things a person ever does, and it almost never feels like growth while it's happening. It feels like loss, which leaves a question with no solid floor under it. Can you love something completely and still have to leave it? Love it without reservation and walk away without apology, both at once, both true? Nietzsche never stopped loving Wagner's music, not for a single day, even while he took a hammer to the man. He never stopped honoring Schopenhauer's terrible honesty, Even while he turned its conclusion inside out, he didn't resolve the contradiction, he lived inside it. It may not be a contradiction that wants resolving. A certain kind of love may only be proved by the leaving, by what you carry out with you and what you find you can finally set down. The people we've outgrown have a way of coming back at this hour, not the daytime versions, the arguments and the reasons, but the warmth of them, the particular sound of a voice. The room gets quiet enough, late enough, to let them in. Notice yours. The specific dark of it. The small settling sounds of a house at rest. It is the kind of dark in which you can hold someone you've left and miss them, and still not go back. Nietzsche knew that dark too, but the thing he could never forgive, that final kneeling at the cross, pointed at something far larger than one composer losing his nerve, because the God whose cross Wagner had knelt before was, in Nietzsche's eyes, already gone. It hadn't been disproved in an argument or stormed out on in anger. It had died the way a vast old institution dies, slowly from the inside, while everyone went on lighting the candles. And almost no one, Nietzsche thought, had yet grasped what they had done or what it was going to cost them. There is an event in the history of the West so enormous that it happened more or less without anyone noticing. The shops stayed open, the trains ran, people fell in love and paid their debts and grumbled about the weather. And underneath all of it, according to Nietzsche, the one fact that had held the whole civilization up quietly gave way, and almost nobody felt the floor shift. He told it as a story, a small parable he slipped into a book in 1882, and it is one of the most haunting things he ever wrote. So stand inside it for a moment. It's a bright weekday morning in a market square, and you are there among the stalls with everyone else when a man comes running in carrying a lit lantern, a lantern in full daylight, shouting over and over, "I'm looking for God, I'm looking for God." And you laugh. Of course you do. Everyone does. Nobody in this square believes in God. You are all modern, sensible people who settled that question long ago, so the jokes come easily. Has he lost God like a set of keys? Did God wander off, or emigrate, or go into hiding? The man with the lantern is a curiosity, a holdover, faintly ridiculous, still hunting for something the rest of you cleared out of your lives years back. And then he stops and turns and looks straight at you, and the laughter dies in your throat. "Where is God?" he says. "I'll tell you where. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers." And then comes the passage you don't quite climb back out of. How did we do it? How did we drink the sea dry? Who handed us a sponge large enough to wipe away the whole horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? And where is it moving now? Where are we, falling backward and sideways and down through a space that no longer has an up in it? Can you feel it getting colder? Isn't the night coming on? More of it all the time, so that soon you'll need a lantern even at noon. It is almost universally misread, this passage, and always in the same direction. People hear it as a kind of gloating. There's no one up there after all, so much the better. But look again at who he is shouting at. An argument would be wasted on these people. They are already unbelievers. What he brings instead is news. News of a death they helped cause and have not begun to mourn. His anguish is not that God is gone. It's that nobody around him can see what leaves with him. Because for most of Western history, God was never just one item in the inventory of things that might or might not exist. God was the sun. Less an object in the sky than the light everything else was seen by. Truth hung there. The world made sense because a mind had made it to make sense. Right and wrong hung there, real, woven into the order of things. Your life had a direction because the whole story had an author. Take that center away, and it isn't only Sunday that empties out. It's the floor under the entire building, the quiet assumption that there is a true way things are, and a real difference between good and evil, and a point to any of it. The very assumption the unbelievers in the square were still standing on, without ever once looking down. And there's an obvious objection, the reasonable one, the one most of us would make. Nonsense. We let go of God and the sky stayed up. We built hospitals and wrote charters of human rights and went on being mostly kind to one another. Morality didn't evaporate when the churches emptied, so what is this lunatic actually screaming about? His answer is the eeriest thing in the parable. I have come too early, he says. My time is not yet. The deed is done, but the news of it is still in transit. The way the light of a star that died ages ago goes on crossing the dark toward us, so that we look up and see a sun that isn't there. We are still living on that light. Still spending values that were minted under a God we stopped believing in, as though the account could never run dry. The sky hasn't fallen, because falling, like light, takes time. And we have been far too comfortable to look up. You don't have to travel back to 1882 to find that marketplace. You can probably find it somewhere in your own life, in how quiet the whole thing was. For a great many of us, God didn't die in some dark night of the soul. He just thinned out, got mentioned less, leaned on less, until the faith you were or weren't raised in simply stopped being load-bearing, and you got on with your life, and as far as you could tell, it cost you nothing at all. That smooth, shrugging painlessness is the laugh in the square. It may also be exactly the thing the man with the lantern was most afraid of. And I should be honest about something here, because he was. Nietzsche is a far better doctor than he is a healer. On the diagnosis that we have pulled out the center and not yet felt it, that a long cold is on its way, he is almost unbearably convincing. On the cure, on what a person or a people is supposed to set where the sun used to be, he is shakier, and somewhere under the bravado, I suspect he knew it. The honest position is that nobody has a confident answer. Not him, not the cheerful unbelievers, not the people still in the pews, not me. The hook is gone, and the question of what you hang a life from is genuinely, frighteningly open. And yet he did not only feel the cold, which is the thing that keeps this from being a simple lament. A few years on, the same event turns up in his work wearing an entirely different face. With the old horizon wiped away, he writes, "The sea lies open again, and for perhaps the first time ever, the ships can sail in any direction at all, because the hand that drew the edges of the map has been rubbed out. That is terrifying. It is also a freedom so vast it's hard to look at head-on, a species handed the authorship of its own values, with no adult left anywhere in the room. The death of God is a funeral and an open ocean in the same instant. The cold of that horizon and the thrill of it turn out to be the same cold, the same horizon. And somewhere in all of this, without your quite noticing, the question changed under your feet. You came in thinking the thing in question was whether God exists, a yes or a no, something you could settle and shelve. But that was never what the man with the lantern was screaming about. The question he leaves in your hands is the one beneath it. If the sun really is gone, then what has been holding up everything you call good? And was it ever you? That isn't a question for tonight, and it wouldn't sit still if you tried to make it. It's one to carry down into sleep. And the dark, strangely, is the right place to carry it. A lantern in the morning, after all, is only a light you reach for because the daylight has stopped being enough. And here you are in the small hours, holding one. Let the question travel with you. The mind keeps working at these things in the dark, whether or not you ask it to. Because the cold the madman felt pouring through that opened-up space was not just a mood that would pass by morning. Nietzsche had a name for it. For the specific kind of nothing that moves in once the sun is out and the borrowed light burns low. He believed it was the guest the whole coming age would have to learn to receive, and that it was already, without the slightest hurry, making its way to the door. You already know what the guest says when it finally knocks, because you've heard it before. It doesn't arrive dressed as a philosophy with footnotes and a German name. It comes as a small, flat question. Usually late, usually when you're tired and the day has run out of things to distract you with. What is the point of any of this? Not shouted, barely even troubled. just a quiet draining of colour out of everything you spent the day caring about, and underneath it that level, reasonable little voice asking why you bother when you'll forget it and be forgotten, and the whole thing goes dark in the end regardless. That voice has a name. Nietzsche gave it one, and he thought it was going to be the defining problem of the next 200 years. He called it nihilism, which sounds like a club you could join, but is closer to a weather system or an illness. Nihilism is the suspicion that nothing is worth anything, that no value can be justified all the way down, that if you ask why does this matter for long enough, you hit not bedrock but air. It is the cold the madman felt, blowing through the space where the sun used to be, and Nietzsche saw it coming the way you see a front of bad weather coming from a long way off, with dread. And this is the place where almost everyone has him backwards. Open any list of famous nihilists and his name will be near the top. Nietzsche, patron saint of nothing matters, the man who supposedly looked at the world and shrugged. It is close to the exact reverse of the truth. He was not the nihilist. He was the physician who named the disease, who felt it in the culture's pulse before the symptoms were obvious, and who spent the back half of his working life trying to find something that could stand against it. That line, nihilism at the door, the uncanniest of all guests, he never even published. It sat in one of the private notebooks he filled and never finished, the raw material that would later be gathered up, once he was past defending himself and bound into a book with his name on the spine that he had not, in any real sense, written. The man bracing in those notebooks for an epidemic is the very same man the world would eventually file under the disease. The guest comes, in his telling, as the long-delayed bill for the death of God. It doesn't arrive the instant the old certainties fall, because they don't quite fall. They linger, the way a habit outlives the belief that started it. The trouble comes later, when you notice they're floating, attached to nothing, and the suspicion sets in that good and important and worth it were never carved into the universe at all. They were things we said, and once you've heard them as things we said, it gets very hard to unhear. He thought the guest came in two forms, and they are not the same guest. One is the version most of us mean by the word, a kind of giving up. The values are gone, nothing has replaced them, and you sink into numbness, into the couch, into the low grey hum of why bother. Nietzsche called this the tired kind, the nihilism of exhaustion. But there is a second kind, and it has teeth. This one takes the collapse of the old values as a permission slip. If nothing is sacred, then nothing is protected, and you start pulling down whatever is still standing for the sheer dark thrill of it. Neither was where he wanted anyone to end up. Both were the storm you had to come through to reach the other side, if there was another side which he was never entirely sure of. He was not alone at that door. A few years before he began filling those notebooks, 1,000 miles to the east, a Russian novelist had stared into the identical dark and come back with the opposite report. Fyodor Dostoevsky, whom Nietzsche discovered late and only after the man was dead, and called the one psychologist he had anything to learn from. In Dostoevsky's last great novel, one of the brothers Karamazov, works the problem out loud and reaches a conclusion that has frightened people ever since. If there is no God and no life beyond this one, then nothing is forbidden, everything is permitted. He never quite says it that cleanly, as it happens. The crisp version was sharpened later by the philosopher Sartre, the way a good line always gets sharpened in the retelling. But the two men did entirely different things with the same terror. Dostoevsky, who believed, looked into the void and recoiled. If this is where losing God leads, to a world where everything is permitted, then we have to find our way back to something holy, or we are finished. Nietzsche, who did not believe, looked into the very same void and refused the way back. There is no back, he said. The sun is out, and it is staying out. The only honest direction left is straight through, and the reason this isn't just a quarrel between two dead geniuses is that you have stood at that same door, maybe not as a philosophy, as a Tuesday, as an ordinary afternoon that went flat for no reason you could name. as the strange hollowness that can arrive right after you finally get the thing you'd been chasing, when you notice the hole it was meant to fill is still exactly the size it was. As 3 a.m, the house quiet, the question sitting on the end of the bed with no drama at all, just patience. And what, in the end, was all of that for? You didn't read it in a Russian novel. It came to you directly, the way it always does. There is an odd kind of comfort waiting in that though, and it should be said plainly. To learn that the thing at the foot of the bed has a name, that the most piercing minds of an entire century met it and shook, that one of them braced for it like a coming plague, and the other wrote 600 pages trying to keep it out of the house, is strangely steadying. It means the 3 a.m. visitor is not a private defect of yours, not proof that something in you is uniquely broken. It is a known guest. It has a name, a history, a literature. It has sat at the foot of a great many beds. Naming it doesn't send it away, but it changes what it's like to sit there with it. The difference between meeting a stranger in the dark and recognizing an old, difficult acquaintance. It leaves you, though, with the two of them at the door and no clean way to choose. Dostoevsky says you cannot actually live in this emptiness, that a person who truly believes everything is permitted will, in the end, permit everything, and that the only sane move is to find your way back to something you can kneel to. Nietzsche says there is no back, that kneeling again would be a lie, and you don't get to unknow what you know, that the one thing still worthy of the name courage is to stay out here in the open and build. Both of them looked straight at the same nothing. Both were among the clearest-eyed who ever did, and they walked away pointing in opposite directions. You can feel the pull of each depending on the hour. The dark doesn't settle it for you. It is not an accident that the guest prefers this hour. During the day, you are busy being a person who finds things meaningful. There are tasks and people, and the steady, low-level work of caring that a life is made of. At night, all of that goes quiet, the work stops, and the question of whether there was anything underneath it can finally be heard. That is not a malfunction of the dark. It might be the one time the question gets a fair hearing, so if it's here with you now, you don't have to answer it, and you don't have to drive it off. You can let it sit there at the edge of the bed, named at last while you go down into sleep, and notice, on the way under, the one thing the guest can never quite account for, that the values it came to question are still, quietly, the ones you'd reach to defend. Even out here, past the end of every certainty, you turn out to be holding on to something. You just can't, at this hour, say where you got it. Where you got it is the question that won't let you sleep once it's in. The values you'd reach to defend in the dark, good, evil, decent, cruel, feel less like opinions than like furniture, like part of the structure of the world itself. They feel discovered, not made, as if good were simply out there. The way north is out there, and you had merely learned to point at it. Nietzsche's most disturbing book exists to tell you that this is exactly backwards. Your morality was not discovered. It was made at a particular time by particular people for a particular and very human reason, and the people who made it are not the ones you would guess. He called the book a genealogy, a family tree. You trace a family tree to find out who someone really came from, and often enough you turn up an ancestor nobody mentions at dinner. Nietzsche did this for morality itself. He refused the only question philosophers usually ask about values, is this one true? And asked a colder, more historical one instead. Where did it come from? Who first called something good? And what did they mean by it? And what were they trying to do? Treat morality not as a law handed down from the sky, but as a thing with a history, with origins and motives, and everything you took as simply given starts to look strange. His answer takes you back to the ancient world, to a time before our good and evil existed at all. In the beginning, he says, good was a word the strong used for themselves. The aristocrat, the warrior, the noble looked at his own strength and health and confidence and beauty and called it good because it was his. and bad was just his word for everyone unlike him, the low, the common, the weak, the ones who served. Not evil, there was no evil yet, only lesser, contemptible perhaps, but beneath real notice. This is morality flowing downhill from the top, out of a powerful man's overflowing yes to himself and his kind. But the people down at the bottom, the conquered, the enslaved, the ones who served and could not fight back, lived all of this very differently, and out of that difference they made the most consequential move in the history of the human conscience. They could not beat the strong on the strong's own ground. The strong had the swords and the horses and the long, easy laughter of people who have never lost. So they opened a second front in the only territory still left to them, the question of what is good at all. And here a particular feeling does the work, a feeling Nietzsche named with a French word, ressentiment, ruchsante machen. It is resentment, but a specific kind, the resentment of someone who cannot strike back, so the hatred has nowhere to go and turns inward and curdles and, this is the genius of it, becomes creative. Unable to win the contest, ressentiment rewrites the rules of what counts as winning. And so, the great reversal. Take everything the masters called good, strength, pride, power, that hard, bright confidence, and rename it evil. Take everything the masters called bad, and that the powerless actually possessed, meekness, patience, humility, suffering borne quietly, and rename it good, even holy. Now the strong are not admirable, they are wicked, and the weak are not contemptible, they are blessed, the favored ones, the ones who will be repaid in the end. It is an act of revenge carried out entirely in the imagination, and it is breathtaking. You cannot defeat the powerful, so you declare power itself a sin, and the most astonishing part is that it worked. Slowly, across centuries, the slaves' good and evil overran the masters' good and bad, until it became the moral air of the whole West, the air you are breathing right now. I have to slow down here because this is the passage that has been torn out and turned into something poisonous, and the tearing takes real carelessness. Nietzsche locates this revolt in what he calls a priestly people, and he names the ancient Jews and Christianity after them. To someone hunting for a weapon, that reads like ammunition. But the careless reading has to throw away two things he actually wrote. First, this was never a claim about blood or race. Resentment is a move available to anyone who has ever been beaten and couldn't answer. It belongs to a psychological type, not a people. Second, and this should settle it, Nietzsche calls Christianity the slave revolt's supreme triumph, the form in which it conquered Europe, which means that, in his account, every European Christian is living inside the very morality he traces to the Jews. He isn't arming Christians against anyone, he's telling them that their own morality is that revolt, grown victorious. To make him a prophet of racial hatred, you have to do to his book the exact thing this chapter is about. Lift the few sentences that sound like a blade and quietly lose every paragraph that would have stayed your hand. None of which makes it a comfortable read. He wrote in a century soaked in this kind of language, and there are lines that wince under the eye. But the man and the argument both cut against the use his name was later put to, and that difference is the whole point. And this is what almost everyone misses in both directions. The people who think Nietzsche is cheering for the masters and the people who think he's smearing the meek. He is doing neither quite. He thought the slave revolt was one of the most creative things our species has ever managed. The masters, for all their splendor, were a little boring, healthy, shallow, like magnificent animals who never had reason to look inward. It was the powerless, driven in on themselves with no outlet but their own minds, who invented the inner life, depth, conscience, the soul, the long-examined ache of being a self. Human history, he wrote, would be far too stupid without the spirit the powerless brought into it. So when he traces your morality back to a wound, the wound is also where he says your depth came from. The injury and the interior are the same event. Not everyone accepted the diagnosis. A later philosopher, Max Scheler, took up the tool and turned it back on him, agreeing that resentment is real, a genuine poison that loves to wear the mask of virtue, but insisting Nietzsche had aimed it too widely. Sometimes, Scheler said, kindness is just kindness. Sometimes the gentle are gentle all the way down, with no revenge hidden in the basement, which leaves the real question wide open. How much of what you call your goodness is the genuine article, and how much is the old scoreboard quietly rewritten in your favor? Which is where this stops being a tale about dead aristocrats and becomes something you can test on yourself tonight. Bring to mind something you call evil, not a cartoon, a real verdict you hold about a person or a kind of person you have honestly condemned. Now go back and find where the verdict was actually born. Sometimes it was born in strength. You saw real cruelty and named it, clear-eyed with nothing to gain. But sometimes, if you're honest, it was born somewhere else. In a moment, you were passed over, beaten, shut out, made small, with no way to even the score. And the one move still open to you was to decide, in the privacy of your own chest, that the people who had won were bad, and that you, in losing, were the good one. You can almost feel the click when it happens, if you watch for it. The instant a plain fact, they beat me, converts into a moral fact, they are wicked and I am righteous. It is one of the least flattering things a person can catch themselves doing. It is also, more or less, what everyone does. So the question he leaves with you isn't whose theory wins, the masters or the slaves, Nietzsche's or Scheller's. It's quieter and it lands closer to home. The morality you'll wake up and act on tomorrow, the things you'll call good, the people you'll call bad, whose is it? Did you arrive at it or simply inherit it and forget that you had? And how much of it, when the lights are off and there's no one to perform for, is an overflowing yes to something you love? And how much is the oldest, cleverest revenge of the ones who couldn't win? You don't owe me an answer, but you might, before you drift off, want one for yourself. If catching yourself in that move just now produced a small flush of discomfort, a tightening, a wish to look away, that's worth noticing and then setting down. You don't have to fix it tonight. Let the jaw unclench, let the shoulders drop, let the breath go out slowly. Self-knowledge will keep until morning. For now, it's enough to have seen the thing and to lie here a while with that strange, level honesty that only seems to arrive once the day is safely over and there's nothing left to defend. But before sleep takes you, one last turn of the screw, because Nietzsche couldn't leave it where the story leaves it. Look again at what the slaves actually did. Beaten, powerless, with no army and no weapons, they reached for the only power still within reach, the power to decide what counts as good, and with it they conquered the world. That is not the absence of a will to dominate. It is a will to dominate that found another road, and it made him wonder whether the same hidden drive was running under everything, under master and slave, saint and tyrant, the kindness and the cruelty, you and me alike. He gave that drive a name, and it became the single most misread thing he ever wrote, turned by careless hands into precisely the brutal little slogan it was built to overthrow. The name he gave it was the will to power, and the instant you hear it, you can feel the trap close, because it sounds like the very thing it was built to overthrow. Will to power. It has the cadence of a boot coming down, and it is almost impossible, on a first hearing, not to fill those 3 words in with everything ugly the 20th century did in their name. The crude reading writes itself, and it carries a certain brutal logic. Life is about power. The strong take, the weak are taken from, and that is simply the way of things written into the blood. So stop moralizing and admit it. This is the Nietzsche of the edgy quotation and the recruitment pamphlet, the one a particular kind of reader has always adored. And it's a counterfeit. The real idea points almost the other way. Start with what he actually wrote in a book he actually published. A living thing, he says, does not mainly want to survive. Survival is a side effect. What it wants, underneath, is to discharge its strength, to grow, to extend itself, to press out against whatever stands in its way. Life is less an effort to stay alive than an effort to become more, and that pressing out, that overcoming of resistance, takes 1,000 forms, almost none of which look anything like a man with a whip. It's the sapling cracking the pavement. It's the painter at war with a canvas that won't do what she sees. It's the kid finally landing the trick after 100 falls, the runner going through the wall, the slow mastery of a language or an instrument or a fear. Power, in his sense, is the overcoming of resistance, the live pressure in everything that grows to become more than it was. And the highest form of it, the one he cared about most, has nothing to do with power over anyone else at all. It is power over yourself. Life, he has one of his characters say, is the thing that must always overcome itself. The will to power, at full strength, turns inward and becomes the long, unglamorous work of mastering your own chaos, disciplining the impulses, shaping the raw clay of whoever you happen to be into someone you've actually chosen. Even the monk starving himself in a cell is doing it, exercising an iron power over his own appetites. And the tyrant, the bully, the man who needs to dominate a room. Nietzsche's diagnosis is almost the reverse of the slogan. That need is usually a confession of weakness. The person who can't master himself reaches for the cheap version and masters someone else instead. The genuinely powerful have no such need. They are busy with the harder conquest, the one that doesn't show, the one in the mirror. This was, in the end, his reply to the dead teacher of his youth. Schopenhauer had looked at the same restless wanting and prescribed the cure of quieting it, of starving the will until it went still. Nietzsche looked at the very same drive and refused the cure. You cannot switch the will off without dying, he answered, because the will to overcome is simply what it is to be alive. You don't get to silence it. You only get to choose what you point it at. You already know this drive, even if you've never given it his grand name. You saw it not long ago, in the way the powerless once overthrew the powerful, not with armies, but by reaching for the only kind of power left to them, finding another road the way it always does. And it finds one in you, on the most ordinary mornings. The run you didn't want and took anyway. The conversation you'd been dodging for weeks and finally, heart going, had. The sentence you rewrote 6 times until it stopped lying. The flash of an impulse, to snap, to quit, to numb out, that rose up and that you watched rise and chose not to obey. That small private win over your own resistance, the one nobody saw and nobody clapped for, that, he would tell you, is the will to power in its purest form. Nobody is beaten in it. You simply become, by a single degree, more than you were yesterday, against the part of you that would much rather have stayed the same. Now, honesty, because the people who study this for a living genuinely come to blows over it. How big a claim is it? In the books he published, the will to power reads mostly as a deep truth about living things, a psychology, the hidden engine under everything that strives. But in the private notebooks, the ones gathered up after his death into that book he never assembled, it sometimes swells to take in everything, all of reality, down to the blind forces studied by physics as will to power and nothing besides, the whole universe as one immense straining to overcome. Some serious readers, the philosopher Heidegger among them, took that cosmic version as the secret heart of the entire project. Others, and I'll admit I lean this way while telling you plainly that it's contested, suspect the cosmic version was a wild speculation he kept to his notebooks precisely because he hadn't earned it, and that the real defensible idea is the human-sized one. The truth is that nobody can tell you for certain how far he meant it to reach, whether it is a theory of you or a theory of everything, and maybe that uncertainty is exactly where to leave it, because the cosmic question was never the one that mattered to you here at this hour. Whether the will to power is the secret of the galaxies is a fine thing to argue in a seminar. Whether it is the secret of you that you don't have to argue because you can feel it directly. It isn't a question that wants an answer so much as a thing that wants noticing. The next time you push against your own limit, against the soft, heavy pull of staying exactly as you are, you won't need to decide what that pressure ultimately is or how far it runs out into the stars. You'll only need to feel it there, the oldest motion in you still running. That turns out to be answer enough. So let the galaxies go for tonight. The room you're in is small and quiet and warm, and the grand idea Nietzsche spent his ruined health chasing is right here in it with you. Not out among the stars, but in the slow rise and fall of your own chest, which has been pressing back against the weight of the air, overcoming that small resistance 10,000 times a day without once asking your permission. The most enormous thing in his philosophy is also the most ordinary thing in the room. It has been keeping you alive this whole time, and it will go on doing it while you sleep. And yet a drive that only ever overcomes is a drive that must be heading somewhere. If life is the thing that always has to exceed itself, then the question Nietzsche couldn't put down was the obvious vertiginous one. Exceed itself toward what? What is a human being straining to become when it pushes past the edge of what it already is? He dared to give that an answer, a soaring, half-mad, endlessly misused answer, and it became the single image his name has never been able to shake. His answer came as a picture, and once you've stood inside it, it's hard to climb back out. A rope, not a tightrope strung up for a show, but a single thin line stretched across a deep drop, cliff to cliff. At the near end, behind you, is the animal you came from. At the far end, ahead and barely visible, is something you could still become, and you are not standing safely on either cliff. You're out on the rope, mid-crossing, right now, with the wind moving and the drop underneath. That, Nietzsche said, is what a human being is. Not a creature that has arrived, but a rope stretched between the beast and the overman, a dangerous crossing and a dangerous looking back and a dangerous shuddering and standing still. What is worth loving in a person, he wrote, is that they are a bridge and not a destination. The overman, that is the usual English for it. The German is Übermensch, Obermensch, and the old translations made it Superman, which is a small disaster because it drops a comic book straight into the middle of one of the most serious ideas in modern philosophy. The Über means over or beyond or across, the way you go over a bridge. So the overman, the one who has crossed, who has overcome the human as it currently is. In a world where the old source of meaning has gone dark, where no one is handing values down from above any longer, the overman is the one who can stand in that emptiness without falling apart and become, in Nietzsche's phrase, the meaning of the earth, making one out of himself, since none was waiting out there to be found. And this is the idea his name has been chained to a death's head ever since, because it is the one that got twisted into the master race. The blonde Superman with the subhuman crawling beneath him. You can watch the forgery being built step by step. Take overman, over what? Over yourself, and quietly swap in over other people. Add a pseudo-biology of blood and breeding that Nietzsche never wrote and would have spat at. Point it outward, at other tribes instead of inward, at your own comfortable smallness. And there it is. A monster wearing the mask of a man who spent his life despising the very nationalism and race hatred it was used to justify. There is no race in the overman, no breeding, no conquest of anyone. The whole drama is internal. It is the rope you cross alone, in the privacy of your own chest, against nobody but the person you already are. I should be straight with you though, the overman is a strange and slippery thing to pin down. He blazes through that one wild book and then nearly vanishes from everything Nietzsche wrote afterward. Scholars still argue over whether he meant an actual future kind of human being, or an ideal to measure yourself against, or simply a poem about a possibility. He never settled it. It is less a blueprint than a direction to face, a far cliff you may never reach that nonetheless tells you which way is up. But Nietzsche knew the Overman was a hard thing to sell to a crowd, and so in that same opening passage, he does something far cleverer and far more chilling. He turns the rope around. He stops pointing at the far cliff and points instead at what the human becomes if it stops climbing altogether, if it gives up the crossing and just settles. He called this figure the last man. And it is the last man, not the Overman, who should keep you awake, because he is the one you are overwhelmingly more likely to find waiting in the mirror. The last man is the human being who has traded greatness for comfort and called it a fair deal. He has abolished hardship and risk and longing and danger, all the things that hurt, and with them, without quite noticing, he has abolished the stars. He takes a small pleasure for the day, a small pleasure for the night. He looks after his health. Becoming poor or rich is too much effort now. Ruling or obeying, too much trouble. Everything is smoothed down, made safe, made easy, made small. We have invented happiness, say the last men, and they blink. That blink is the whole of it, the slow, contented, untroubled blink of a creature that has stopped reaching for anything and decided that the stopping is happiness. And here Nietzsche plants the bleakest joke in the book. Zarathustra describes the last man as the most contemptible thing he can imagine, a warning meant to frighten the crowd back toward the climb, and the crowd, hearing it, does not recoil in horror. The crowd lights up. "Give us that," they shout. "Make us into these last men and you can keep your Overman." They want the comfort. Of course they want the comfort. Who, honestly, wouldn't? That cheer, a whole people begging to be made small and safe and done, is the most prophetic thing Nietzsche ever wrote, because he was describing us. Not the people of 1883, us now, with a precision that should make the hair stand up, the frictionless life, the feed that fills every empty minute, the queue that handles the empty evening, the delivery that means you never have to want anything for longer than an hour, the tracked sleep and the optimized diet and the 1,000 small choices made always, reasonably, in the direction of less discomfort. A little pleasure for the day, a little for the night. We have, in literal fact, invented happiness, and we blink at our screens. I have to say the next part carefully because there's a sermon hiding here, and the sermon would be a lie. I am not standing above any of this. Nobody is. The last man is not some other, lazier person across town. He is the default setting of a comfortable life, the gravity that pulls on every one of us all day toward the smaller and safer and easier thing. Nietzsche wasn't trying to shame you out of comfort. He was trying to show you the gravity so that at least you'd know what it is you're leaning against. So run the audit gently without the lash. Take today, your actual today, the one you just lived. How much of it was the crossing and how much was the blink? Set the thing you reached for that cost you something, the hard call you made, the work you didn't hand off to a screen, the discomfort you walked into on purpose, beside the thing you reached for precisely because it asked nothing of you. This isn't a test you fail. Most of any day is comfort, and most of it has to be. You cannot cross a rope every waking minute, and the person who tries is insufferable. The question is only the proportion and the direction. Which way, on balance, were you leaning? Because the rope was never a place you arrive at and plant a flag. It's a direction you lean, or fail to lean, in 1,000 small moments, all day, every day, and then he leaves you there, on the rope, and refuses to tell you which way to go, because telling you would make him the one thing he could not abide, a preacher handing values down from a height. He won't do it. He only makes you feel the two pulls at once, the pull toward becoming more, which is cold and frightening and asks for everything, and the pull toward becoming comfortable, which is warm and kind and asks for nothing you can see. You don't have to choose your whole life tonight, but you might ask yourself, with no one else in the room, which way you have actually been facing lately. Not to answer to him or to me, but to know it for yourself, here in the dark, where the answer can't be performed. You don't have to carry much into sleep tonight, and the warm dark you're lying in is, let's be honest, a small, last man pleasure of its own, and an entirely allowed one. Rest was never the enemy. Even the rope walker has to come down and lie flat. So carry only the small question, and carry it loosely, the way you'd hold something you don't want to wake. Which way have I been leaning? The mind goes on sorting these things while you sleep, quietly, without your supervision. You may surface in the morning with the direction a single degree clearer than it was when you closed your eyes. Forget for a moment the future you're building. Set down the question of which way you're climbing, because there is a far stranger question waiting underneath it, and it comes when it comes in the dark, at the loneliest hour you have. Suppose that late one night, a night like this one, something slips into the room with you. Call it a demon, Nietzsche did. It comes into your loneliest loneliness, the place no one else has ever been, and it leans close and it tells you this: the life you are living, exactly as you have lived it, this one, with everything in it, you will live again, not once, but innumerable times, and nothing in it will ever be different. Every joy and every pain, every thought, every breath, every wasted hour, and every moment of grace, all of it returning in precisely the same order, down to this spider in the corner and this moonlight on the floor and this very moment, and the demon itself leaning in to say all of this to you again. The hourglass of your existence turned over and over, forever, and you with it, a speck of dust turning. Sit in that for a second before the mind does what minds do and softens it. This is not the comforting thing it can sound like at a glance. It has nothing to do with reincarnation. You don't come back as someone else, somewhere better, having learned your lessons. There are no lessons because there is no memory. You won't know you've done it before, so you can't brace, can't improve, can't skip the worst parts. And it isn't a fresh start. It's the same start, the same middle, the same end, on a loop with no exit and no edits. Every humiliation, again, the grief, again, at full strength, as if for the first time. The thing you said that you would give years of your life to unsay, you will say it again and again, forever, and mean it each time. That is the actual content of the demon's offer, not a second chance, the same chance, endlessly, exactly. And then the demon asks its question and waits. Would you throw yourself down and grind your teeth and curse it for saying such a thing? Or has there been, somewhere in your life, even once, a moment so complete that you would look the demon in the face and answer, "You are a god, and I have never heard anything more divine. Yes, all of it, again, forever." Notice that the demon doesn't argue. It doesn't try to convince you the universe works this way. It only asks and then watches what happens in your body when you imagine it, the flinch or the strange wild gladness. Because that flinch or that gladness is the answer, and the answer is about you, not about the universe. It came to Nietzsche all at once, this thought, on a walk in the mountains in August of 1881, beside a lake, next to a great pyramid of rock that is still there, that people still go and stand beside. He scrawled it on a sheet of paper and added a line underneath, 6,000 feet beyond man and time. He knew at once that it was the heaviest thing he would ever carry and the center of everything he had to say. He also seems to have known it might be more than a person could bear, which is exactly why he built it as a question and not a sermon. Which brings up the obvious thing your mind has probably been pushing toward this whole time. Is it true? Does the universe actually do this? Turn the hourglass over and run it all again? And here I have to tell you what the people who spend their lives on Nietzsche actually argue about, because it is the hinge the whole thing swings on. In his private notebooks, he did sketch something like a proof that if the stuff of the universe is finite and time is endless, then every possible arrangement, including this exact one, including you lying here, must eventually come back around an infinite number of times. A few serious readers take that cosmic version as his real teaching, but most don't, and the reason is simple. In everything he actually chose to publish, he never once claims it's true. He says, what if? He hands it over as a demon's question, not a physicist's finding. And that points to the reading most scholars hold now, that eternal recurrence was never really a theory about the cosmos at all. It was a tool, a weight you set your own life on to find out what your life weighs. And it is the heaviest weight ever set on a life, heavier than any heaven or hell, precisely because of what it takes away. Every story human beings have ever told about what comes after offers some kind of exit. Heaven rights the wrongs. Hell at least gives the suffering a meaning. Even plain oblivion, the lights going out for good, offers the mercy of an ending. The demon offers none of these, no reward, no justice, no progress, no rest, no ending of any kind. Only this, exactly this, again, which means there is no longer anywhere to put your hope. The hope that it gets better, that it adds up to something, that one day you'll finally be free of it. The demon quietly removes all of it and leaves you alone with your actual life and asks whether the life itself, with nothing added and nothing promised, is enough. Half a world away, an older and deeper tradition had been looking at almost the same image for 2,500 years and had run, full speed, in the opposite direction. In the Buddhist and Hindu vision, existence really is a wheel. Birth, death, rebirth, turning and turning, the cycle they call samsara, but there, the wheel is the affliction, the thing to be escaped. The entire path is built to carry you off it, toward the release they call nirvana, the blowing out, the end of the turning at last. And that is the very thing Schopenhauer had pressed on the young Nietzsche years before. Quiet the will, stop the wanting, step off the wheel. Two of the great answers our species has reached, set side by side, facing the identical fact, life as an endless return, and pointing exactly opposite ways. One says the wheel is the trap and wisdom is the door out. The other says the wheel is all there is and wisdom is learning, somehow, to want it. Nietzsche knew the Eastern answer only at a distance, through a thick fog of Schopenhauer and second-hand translation, and he read it, perhaps unfairly, as a kind of magnificent tiredness, the wisdom of a civilization grown so weary it wanted above all to stop existing. Whether that is just to Buddhism is very doubtful, but it tells you everything about him. He could not forgive an answer that wanted off the wheel. He needed you to want the wheel. This is where the demon stops being a story about a haunted philosopher and becomes something you can actually use, tonight and every night, for the rest of your life. The mistake is to treat it as a single exam you pass or fail. It's better understood as an instrument, small, portable, brutally honest, that you can pick up whenever you want the truth about how you're living. You don't ask it about the universe, you ask it about today. Take the day you just lived, the ordinary one, the Tuesday, and set it under the demon's question. If you had to live this exact day again, unchanged, an infinite number of times, would you want it back? Not as a verdict on your worth, not as one more reason to be disappointed in yourself, only as information, a way of finding out, with no one grading you, which hours of your life you are actually living and which ones you are merely getting through on the way to some better hour that keeps not arriving. Most of us, most days, are mostly getting through. The demon's question is how you catch that while there is still time to do something about it. It lets you feel, directly, in your own chest, the difference between a moment you would gladly live 10,000 times and a moment you are only enduring. That difference is the most useful piece of self-knowledge there is, and it costs nothing, and it is available right now, in the dark, at the very edge of sleep. And somewhere in turning it over, the question you started with has quietly become a different one. You came to it wanting to know whether it was true, whether the hourglass really turns, whether you will really live all of this again. But you can feel that question going slack, losing its grip, because it was never the one that mattered. The demon doesn't actually care whether you believe him. He cares what you would have to become. And that is the question you're left holding, the one that changes you whether the universe repeats or not. How well disposed to yourself, to your one strange life, to its losses and its waste and its unbearable particular moments. How well disposed would you have to become to crave nothing more than to live the whole of it again? You don't have to answer that tonight. You only have to notice honestly how far you are right now from being able to say yes, and that the closing of that distance is the whole of the work. It is no accident that this question is loudest right here, at the edge of sleep, because sleep is the one place you rehearse the demon's offer every single night without noticing. Each night, you let the day end exactly as it was, with no way left to fix it. You turn the hourglass over, and in the morning, it begins again. The demon's terrible question is, in the end, only the quiet one that every night already asks you. The day is over, and it was what it was. Can you set it down, and would you take it back? Let that be the last thought, and let it be a gentle one. You are not required to have said yes yet. Tonight it is enough to have heard the question clearly, once, in the dark, in your own voice. Though there is almost always one place the demon's question can't get past. One moment in a life, one loss, one thing done or left undone that you would give nearly anything to lift out of the loop so that all the rest could return, but not that. And it is there, at that one unbearable point, that Nietzsche's strangest and most demanding idea is waiting. He thought the highest thing a human being could do was not to escape that moment, or undo it, or even make a quiet peace with it, but somehow, against everything in you, to love it. He gave that a name, 2 words in an old dead language, and they are either the most freeing thing he ever wrote, or the most elaborate lie he ever told himself. Everyone has the one scene. The mind goes looking for it on its own, usually around 2 in the morning, when the defenses are down and there's nothing to do but lie there and watch it run again. The thing you said or didn't say, the turn you took or missed, the person you lost, or the way you lost them. You've rewatched it 1,000 times, and 1,000 times you've quietly edited it, played the version where you were braver or kinder or just paying attention. And then the edit ends, and the real version is still sitting there, unchanged. The one piece of your life you would give almost anything to reach back and lift out. And it's to that scene, the exact one, the one you'd undo first, that Nietzsche brings the 2 words I left hanging a moment ago. Amor fati, amor fati. It's Latin, and it means love of fate. Not accept your fate, not make your peace with it, not even forgive it. Love it, want it so entirely, he wrote, that you would have nothing be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, including that scene, including the worst thing that ever happened to you. On a first hearing it lands as either impossible or a little obscene. Love the thing that wounded you, but the idea is far stranger and far more careful than the slogan it's become. Start with what it is not, because 2 false versions have grown over the real one like ivy and have to be pulled away first. One is the brave, clenched endurance of what you can't change, the stiff upper lip, the bearing up. That's nearer to the Stoics, and it isn't this. The other is the gentle thing we tell each other at funerals. Everything happens for a reason. The loss was secretly a gift. One day it will all make sense. Amor fati has no such comfort anywhere behind it. There is no plan. The sun went out long ago, and no one is arranging your pain into a lesson. No reason waiting to be revealed. No payoff on its way. It is the yes you say after you've given up every single reason to say it. The hardest yes there is, precisely because there is nothing underneath it to make it easy. You affirm your life not because it was good for you, but because it was yours. And it was life, and there is no other one on offer. And this is exactly the attitude that could answer the demon. the one who comes in the dark and asks whether you'd live it all again, unchanged forever. Amor fati is what a real yes to him would feel like from the inside. They are the same affirmation seen from two sides. The demon's question is the test. Love of fate is what passing it would mean. To love your fate completely just is to be able to want its eternal return. Now, this resembles something far older, and the resemblance is why the two keep getting confused. The Stoics taught a yes to fate as well, Marcus Aurelius writing reminders to himself before dawn, Epictetus, Epictetus, who had been a slave and knew something about a fate you didn't get to choose. Accept what is not in your control, wish things to be as they are. Don't let what you can't change disturb your peace. It sounds nearly identical. But Nietzsche thought the gap between them was the whole point, and it comes down to what each one is for. The Stoic says yes to fate in order to get free of it, to reach a calm that nothing can disturb, a kind of armor against suffering. Nietzsche didn't want armor. He wanted to stand in his life completely undefended and love it anyway. The Stoic's yes keeps the pain at a survivable distance. Nietzsche's yes invites the whole of it, pain and all, to come the entire way in. One is consent, and its reward is peace. The other is love, and its reward is intensity. Two answers that look like twins, aimed, in the end, at opposite organs. And here I have to stop and turn the idea over honestly, because there is a real problem buried in it, and skating past the problem would be the exact kind of dishonesty Nietzsche couldn't stand. Can you actually love what wounded you? Not say the words, feel it. Go back to your 2 a.m. scene. If loving it means deciding the loss was really a blessing, that you're grateful it happened, that it was good for you after all, then amor fati is just denial in a beautiful Latin coat, the most elegant lie ever told, and it becomes the very thing it claims to defeat, a refusal to see your life as it actually was. I don't believe that's what he meant, and the most careful readers don't either. But the answer they give is hard, and I want to hand it to you straight. You don't love the wound on its own as a good thing. You love the whole life, and the wound is woven into that whole so tightly that you cannot pull the one thread without the entire cloth coming apart in your hands. The person you became, the things you can now see, the specific human being lying in this specific dark tonight, all of it grew in part out of the worst of it. Amor fati isn't the claim that the bad thing was good. It's the refusal to pretend you'd keep the cloth while cutting out the thread when the cloth is made of the thread. Whether a person can really feel that and not merely argue it on a page is a genuinely open question. I've sat with it for years and I'm still not sure of the answer. These two words have had a strange second life lately, and what's happened to them is a small, almost gentle rehearsal of what was done on a far larger scale to the man who wrote them. You can buy amor fati now, stamped on a coin to carry in your pocket. You can find it sold as a life hack for turning every setback into fuel. Love whatever happens, fail forward. There's no crime in finding comfort there, and the people offering it mostly mean well. But watch what quietly gets removed. The cold, godless nothing underneath it, the demon in the doorway, the fact that it was the hardest yes a person can attempt and not a tip for a better quarter. A phrase built to make you love a life with no reward in it gets resold as a way to win. The slogan meant to defeat the comfortable, blinking creature becomes one more of his comforts. Nietzsche would have found that very funny and a little bit sad, so it leaves you here and refuses to resolve. On one side, amor fati might be the most freeing thing a human being can reach. The end of the war with your own past, the end of the 2 a.m. rewind, the day you finally turn and face the whole of what happened to you and, instead of flinching, open your arms to it. On the other, it might ask for something no honest person can give, a love of the unbearable that, examined closely, can't be reliably told apart from a lie. Both might be true. It might be the highest wisdom and a beautiful evasion at the same time, shifting between them depending on the day, depending on the wound. Nietzsche held it up as the thing to reach for and admitted in the same breath that he mostly fell short of it himself. Maybe that's the most honest thing anyone can say about it. Less a place you arrive at than a direction you keep turning toward, knowing you may never fully get there. You don't have to love your fate tonight. You don't have to forgive the 2 a.m. scene or reach any verdict about it at all. Just notice for a moment the plain fact of the body lying here in the dark, the body that has carried every piece of it, every loss and wrong turn and unbearable replay, all the way to this exact moment, and is still here, still breathing, having already survived the whole of what you'd undo. Let the shoulders come down. Let the rewind slow on its own. The arms that would have to open someday to do this impossible thing can stay closed tonight. It's enough for now to know which way they would open. Breathe out. The fate is already yours completely. The loving of it can wait for morning, or for years, or for never. There is a hard irony folded into all of this, and Nietzsche walked straight into the center of it. He made the love of one's fate the highest thing a person could do, and his own fate, the one he was meant to love, held a final cruelty he never saw coming and never lived awake to see. The one person closest to him in all the world, the one who would outlive him and stand guard over his name, was about to take everything he had written and turn it, patiently, lovingly, into its exact opposite. If amor fati means embracing the whole of what happens to you, then the fate waiting for Friedrich Nietzsche would put his own idea to a test no philosophy should ever have to pass. By the early 1890s, in a comfortable house in the German town of Weimar, 2 things were happening under one roof, and they could not have been further apart. Upstairs, in a shuttered room, lay a man who could no longer finish a sentence, who didn't always know his own name, who had to be fed and washed and led from chair to bed, the burnt-out ruin of what had been one of the fiercest minds in Europe. And downstairs, in the rooms below his sickbed, that same mind was being painstakingly rebuilt into the exact opposite of everything it had ever stood for. The man who had ended his dearest friendship over anti-Semitism, who had written that the Jew haters of Germany ought to be run out of the country, was being turned, floor by floor in his own house, into the prophet of the master race. And he could not say one word against it because he was upstairs, mindless, dying by degrees while it was done. The person doing the rebuilding was the one who claimed to love him most, his sister, Elizabeth. They had been close once as children in that house full of women, the 2 of them, the bright hope of a family that had lost its men. But a gulf had opened between them in adulthood, and it had opened over precisely this. Elizabeth had married a man Friedrich could not stand, Bernhard Förster, a professional anti-Semite, one of the loudest Jew baiters in Germany, and the 2 of them had sailed off to South America to build a racially pure German colony in the jungle, a place they called Nueva Germania, New Germany. Friedrich refused to attend the wedding. He wrote her scalding letters about the company she was keeping. In one, he told her plainly that these accursed anti-Semite deformities would not be allowed to soil his name. The colony failed, slowly and miserably. Förster poisoned himself, and Elizabeth came home a widow to find her brother collapsing into permanent darkness, his papers unguarded, and, in all of it, a vocation. This is how you forge a philosopher. You don't touch the books he published. Those are already out in the world, beyond your reach. You go instead to the Nachlass, Nachkelas, the German word for the mountain of writing a person leaves behind unpublished. In Nietzsche's case it was enormous, thousands of pages of notebooks scribbled on walks and in sickbeds, full of half-thoughts and contradictions of every idea he ever tried on and then discarded. A great mind's private notebooks contain everything, including each position and its exact opposite, because thinking is the business of trying things on and throwing most of them away, which means that whoever gets to choose which scraps to print and in what order and which to quietly burn can assemble very nearly any philosopher they like out of the same pile of paper. Elizabeth, with a devoted assistant, did exactly that. She gathered the fragments into a volume, gave it a grand title her brother had once considered and then abandoned, The Will to Power, and presented it to the world as his crowning work, the system he had supposedly been building toward all along. It was nothing of the kind. He had given the project up years before. The book was a mosaic of his rejected pieces, set in an order he never chose, pointing at a destination that was hers and not his. The scholars who finally took it apart, decades later, had a blunt name for it: a historic forgery. And it went beyond the philosophy, into the private record, the part you would think no one could fake. We know now, because the originals survived and could be laid side by side with her versions, that she forged or altered dozens of his letters. In one chilling set, she took the warm, loving letters Friedrich had written to their mother and carefully readdressed them to herself, blotting out the word mother in his own hand, so that posterity would remember her as the cherished confidant she had not entirely been. A woman alone at a desk, her dead-eyed brother's handwriting spread out in front of her, calmly deciding what he would be recorded as having felt and toward whom. Upstairs, he could not contradict so much as a comma, and then history handed her the opportunity of a lifetime, and she seized it with both hands. As a new movement came roaring up out of Germany's wreckage, nationalist, enraged, drunk on blood and race and the dream of a master people, Elizabeth understood that her brother, properly edited, could be made its philosopher king. She had built an archive around his name, a shrine to him in that Weimar villa, and now the regime came to kneel at it. Stand in the room in 1934. Adolf Hitler himself climbs the stairs of the house, his personal photographer in tow, and is led to a white marble bust of Nietzsche and stops before it and gazes up while the camera records the communion for the morning papers. The most powerful and most murderous man alive, paying homage to the philosopher who had loathed, with everything in him, exactly this: the mob, the nation, the worship of the herd, the politics of blood. Elizabeth, radiant, pressed one of her brother's walking sticks into the Führer's hands. When she died the following year, Hitler came to her funeral and stood among the mourners. The forgery was finished. The most stateless, most anti-national thinker of the 19th century had been crowned the house saint of the most monstrous nationalism of the 20th. And I owe you the harder version of this story, because the comforting one is its own kind of lie. The comforting version goes, Nietzsche was a pure and gentle soul, and a wicked sister conjured a monster out of nothing at all. It's too clean. The packaging, the race, the blood, the anti-Semitism, the worship of the German nation, all of that was imposed, forged, in flat contradiction of everything he actually wrote. But she did not build it out of nothing. Nietzsche was a real elitist. He genuinely believed in what he called an order of rank, that most people were heard, that a rare higher kind of human being mattered more than the contentment of the many. He had no use for democracy or equality or pity as a public virtue. None of that is Nazism. There is no race in it, no nation, no machinery of murder, and he would have been physically sickened by Auschwitz. But it was real material, and the forgers had something true in their hands to twist. Nor was he a tidy friend of the Jewish people. He fought the organized anti-Semites ferociously, and he also carried, here and there, the offhand anti-Jewish reflexes of his time and place. The honest picture is harder than the comforting one, and far more interesting: a genuinely dangerous, genuinely complicated body of thought, kidnapped, stripped of every line that complicated it, and rebuilt into a weapon, which is, in the end, the very same operation that turned one rueful sentence into a slogan on a gym wall, only this time the workshop was a national archive, and the stakes were a century. It took decades to undo, and in truth, it was never undone completely. After the war, with Nietzsche's name radioactive, half the world now filing him somewhere near the architects of the death camps, a scholar named Walter Kaufmann set himself patiently against the whole edifice. He translated Nietzsche again, read him again, and showed line by line where the forgery lay. He named Elizabeth as the forger and exposed the will to power as the stitched-together thing it was. Others came behind him, including an enormous scholarly edition that went all the way back to the original notebooks and printed them honestly, in order, every fragment dated so that anyone could finally see what had been spliced together and what had been silently cut. Bit by bit, the real man swam back into view. Though, and this is the last turn of the screw, some say Kaufmann pushed too hard the other way, sanded off the genuinely alarming edges, and handed us a tamer, more respectable Nietzsche than the one who actually lived. The truth, as it usually does with him, sits in the uncomfortable middle. Not the Nazi the forgers manufactured, and not the gentle humanist his rescuers needed him to be, but something wilder and harder to hold than either side wanted. There is a terrible irony lying at the bottom of all of this, and of everyone involved, Nietzsche would have seen it most clearly. He was the philosopher who insisted there are no facts, only interpretations, that a thing comes to mean whatever the strongest hand says it means. And then he became the living proof of his own most dangerous idea. Broken down into a heap of fragments, stripped of any power to interpret himself, he was whatever the person holding the pen decided he was. First his sister, then a death's head regime, then the scholars who rescued him, and now, tonight, the version of him quietly assembling itself in your own head as you listen. He taught that whoever controls the interpretation controls the meaning. He simply never pictured the interpreter standing over his own silent, breathing body with the pen. It leaves a question with no settled answer, and one that reaches far past this single ruined man. When an idea is taken and bent into something monstrous, when the will to power is made to mean a death camp, when what doesn't kill you is made to mean look away from someone else's pain, where does the fault actually sit? Is a thinker answerable for every use the world finds for him, including the uses he'd have died to stop? Or does the whole of the guilt belong to the hand that does the bending? Nietzsche, it has to be said, made himself easy to steal. He wrote in sparks and provocations, in fragments he left scattered behind him like loose tools. Does that make him a little complicit, or only terribly unlucky? I'm not going to hand you an answer, partly because I don't have one I would trust you with, and partly because it isn't really a question about a dead German at all. You'll meet it again in smaller clothes, every time you watch something true get bent into something cruel and have to decide who to blame. Where the line falls is yours to draw, tonight, or across the rest of a life. For tonight, though, set the verdict down. Come back to the 2 rooms in that house, the busy one downstairs, where his name was being forged into a weapon, and the still one above it, where the actual man lay in the dark, knowing none of it, and come back to your own room now, around you. At this hour you are far closer to the man upstairs than to the forgers below, quiet, undefended, the day's performance finally over, the self you keep for other people set down for the night. He didn't get to choose how he would be remembered. Almost none of us will. There is a version of you out in other people's heads that you will never get to correct. And the only thing to be done about it is to be, while you are still here and still yourself, as much the real thing as you can manage. He couldn't do even that anymore. The man in the room above the archive, silent for years by then, with no idea, none at all, of the long war being fought downstairs over his name. But the silence had a beginning, and to find it, you have to go back, past the archive and the forgery, to a bright, cold morning in the Italian city of Turin in January of 1889. The most famous version of what happened that morning is one you may already know. And you should hear, as I tell it, that it is almost certainly a legend. A man is crossing a public square when he sees a cab driver beating a horse that won't move, and something in him gives way. He runs to the horse, throws his arms around its neck, and weeps, shielding the animal with his own body until he sinks to the cobblestones. That man was Friedrich Nietzsche, and that, the story says, was the last moment he was ever himself. Whether it truly happened, no one can prove. The only source is a second-hand account set down more than a decade later. But the legend has held because it is almost unbearably perfect. The philosopher of hardness, of the will to power, of saying yes to cruelty as part of life, brought down in the end by an ungovernable surge of pity for a beaten animal. What is actually documented is sadder and stranger than any legend. Over the days that followed, the most ferocious mind in Europe simply came apart. He sent out a flurry of short, deranged notes to his friends, a few of them still flashing with broken brilliance, and he signed them no longer as Nietzsche, but as Dionysus, the Greek god of intoxication and tragic joy he had loved his whole life, and as the crucified, the suffering Christian god he had spent that whole life fighting. At the very end, the two great opposites of all his thinking, the yes-sayer and the man of sorrows, collapsed into a single broken signature at the bottom of the same handful of letters. His old friend Overbeck rushed to Turin, found him at the piano, singing and shouting, and brought him home gently, the way you would lead a child. And the timing of it was the cruelest in the history of philosophy. For almost his entire life, Nietzsche had written into a void, printing his books at his own expense, giving them away, read by very nearly no one. Then, in 1888, the year before he fell, the world finally began to turn toward him. A celebrated Danish critic gave the first public lectures on his work in Copenhagen to full rooms. Word started to travel. For the first time, he could feel his life's work landing somewhere. He called those lectures the cleverest thing anyone had ever written about him. He had waited his whole life for exactly this moment. And then, within a few months, the lights went out and he was not there for any of it. The recognition he had ached for across 40 years arrived just in time for him to be unable to know it had come. For 11 more years he went on living, and the world grew louder and louder with his name, and he heard none of it. What followed was 11 years of silence. The fierce voice that had announced the death of God, that had thundered and laughed and prophesied across page after page, was simply gone. He sat in chairs and stared. Sometimes he played a little at the piano, and they say his playing, at least, stayed beautiful nearly to the end. He was cared for by his mother until she died, and then by the sister who would build the forgery around him while he watched, uncomprehending, from his chair. There are photographs from those years. The great moustache, the eyes gone vacant and far away, a blanket folded over the knees. The man who had asked whether you could bear to live your life again, exactly, forever, spent his own last decade as a question no one could answer and he could no longer ask. Strangest of all, we don't actually know what broke him. For 100 years, the textbook answer was syphilis. General paresis, they called it then. The syphilis of the brain, the diagnosis a doctor in 1889 reached for almost automatically when a middle-aged man lost his mind. But it was never confirmed. There was no autopsy, no test, only a brief examination and the assumptions of the age. And in the last few decades, doctors going back over the records have offered other answers, each at least as plausible. A slow-growing tumour pressing in behind his eyes, an inherited disease of the brain's small vessels, the same kind that may have killed his own father at 36. The honest situation is that the most authoritative reference in all of philosophy now simply lists the possibilities and declines to choose. He became one of the most famous human beings who ever lived, and we cannot say for certain what destroyed him, or even whether the single most famous moment of his life, the horse in the square, ever happened at all. So there is a silence at the center of this story, and it cannot be filled, only kept. We want the ending to mean something, for the horse to be real, for the breakdown to be the price of his terrible honesty, for the cause to have a name, for there to be some lesson in the way a mind like that goes out. There isn't one, or not one, we can reach. He went into the dark the way most people go in the end, ordinarily, medically. for no clear reason, and alone, even with people in the room. The questions stay open. What broke him? Whether the legend is true, what it was like inside him through those 11 wordless years. They don't want answering. They want the kind of respectful silence you would keep at the bedside of someone you couldn't help. Come back to your own breathing for a moment. He's been gone a long time now, more than a century, and the questions about him will outlast every one of us. Nothing you do tonight will settle them, and you don't have to. Only the breath going in and out. The one thing his ruined body kept doing faithfully through all 11 of those silent years, long after the thoughts had stopped. The body's own small yes to another minute and another, asking for nothing, proving nothing. Let yours do the same. Let the shoulders settle into the bed. The man is far past all help now, and you are safe, and the dark is kind, and the only task left tonight is to keep breathing and let it be. And yet the silence isn't quite the end of him, because the questions he asked didn't fall quiet when he did. They went out into the world without him, the way light goes on leaving a star long after the star is gone, and they are still arriving. The death of God and the will to power and the eternal return, whether a person can truly love their fate, whether we are brave enough to make our own values now that the old ones have gone dark. He couldn't answer any of them. That was never the point. He left them for us, left them in fact for you, lying here in the dark. And the only honest thing remaining, before we finally let him go, is to ask the question his whole strange wrecked life puts to us. After everything, the genius, the ruin, and the lie that was made of him, was he right? Was any of it prophecy? Or was the whole of it, in the end, a magnificent delusion? Prophecy or delusion? We've spent a couple of hours now in the company of this strange, ruined, magnificent man, and that is the question his life sets down on the table in front of us. And I'm not going to pretend I can settle it for you, but we can do something better than settle it. We can weigh it honestly here in the dark, where there's no one to perform a verdict for, and then we can do the thing he himself would actually have wanted, which is to leave it open and carry it out of here and let it go on working on us long after the lights are off. Start with the case for prophecy, because it is far stronger than you'd expect from a man whose own life ended in such a wreck. Look hard at what he actually saw coming. In 1882, with the great confident edifice of European civilization still apparently standing, he announced that its foundation had quietly rotted through, that God was dead, that the old source of meaning was gone, and that almost no one had yet felt the floor move. He said the reckoning would unfold across the next 2 centuries, and that the coming age would be a long, cold struggle with the suspicion that nothing means anything at all. And then the next century arrived and did precisely that. When the old God went, people did not simply shrug and carry on the way the comfortable unbelievers in his marketplace assumed they would. They went hunting desperately for something to put in the empty place. And they found the nation and the race and the party. Man-made absolutes, new gods stamped out of politics, demanding the worship and the blood the old one used to. And in the name of those manufactured gods, the 20th century killed more human beings than any century before it. He had seen the shape of that coming. He saw the quieter catastrophe of our own moment too, the comfortable, optimized, endlessly distracted creature who has handed in every star for a feed and calls the exchange happiness. He drew that creature in 1883, right down to the blink of its eyes, and he saw the slow ache underneath it, the low-grade desperation of people who have everything and cannot say what any of it is for, the meaning hunger that doesn't go away just because the church is emptied. Walk through any wealthy, secular, exhausted city tonight, and you are walking through his prediction. Beneath all of it, he went down into the human mind and came back holding the parts we'd rather not look at, the resentment that dresses itself up as virtue, the will to power wearing the mask of love, the noblest values with their roots in something far from noble. A whole century of psychology would spend itself catching up to what he had already named. On the diagnosis, on what was breaking and what was coming, he was right with a frequency that is genuinely unsettling. And then the case for delusion, which is every bit as strong and which always lands in the same spot, never on the diagnosis, always on the cure. He was a brilliant diagnostician and a far weaker physician, and somewhere under the thunder, I think, he knew it. Grant him everything. God is dead, the old values are hollow, the long nihilism is on its way. What then? His answer was that we would make new values out of ourselves, out of nothing, that the strong individual, the overman, would stand upright in the emptiness and become the meaning of the earth by sheer force of creation. And there is the enormous unproven bet his whole life is staked on, the fault line running under all of it. Can a human being actually do that? Can you make a value out of nothing alone by deciding to? Or do values only ever grow in shared soil, in a community, a tradition, a story older and larger than any one person, so that a wholly self-made value is a kind of impossibility, like trying to lift yourself off the ground by pulling on your own collar? The evidence of the last 100 years is not gentle with him. When God died, the lone, serene, value-creating overman did not bloom in the rubble. What bloomed mostly were those manufactured gods, and they were not radiant acts of free creation. They were fear and blood organized at industrial scale. The very catastrophe he half foresaw is also, read another way, the refutation of his remedy. Turned loose to invent our own values, we mostly invented monsters. And there is the long shadow this whole story has been walking around, his contempt for the ordinary, the herd, the average, his cold arithmetic of an order of rank in which most people simply weigh less. None of that is Nazism, but it was the live wire a forger could grab with both hands, and a philosophy that quietly informs most of humanity it matters less is a philosophy that has already laid a fuse, whatever its author intended. And then, the cruelest piece of evidence, the one that won't be argued away, he flunked his own exam. The prophet of affirmation, of loving your fate, of becoming who you are, lived very nearly without love in a body that tortured him, read by almost no one, and walked out into 11 years of total darkness with his life's work about to be stolen and turned into its opposite. If the philosophy was meant as a way to live, it could not save the single life that needed saving most. Though he might answer me from the dark and fairly that I've rigged the test, that he never once promised happiness, that happiness was the last man's grubby little word, and that a life can be a great burning affirmation without ever being, for 1 hour, comfortable. Maybe. That is exactly the kind of thing that cannot be checked from the outside, by me, or by you, or by anyone who wasn't inside that life. That one question, whether we can manufacture our own meaning now that the given kind is gone, is the question his whole project balances on, and it is genuinely, perhaps permanently, open. We are all still living inside the experiment he proposed. The results are not in, and they may never be. And the question itself begins to come apart in your hands, the way his always did. Prophecy or delusion, it sounds like a choice, like you have to file him under one heading or the other. But you can't, and the reason you can't is the whole point. The prophecy and the delusion are not two separate things you could pry apart and keep just the one. They grow from a single root. His absolute refusal of comfort, his demand to look at the abyss with no blanket and no story and no God, and to keep his eyes open. That refusal is precisely what made the diagnosis so piercing. He could see what was coming because he would not let himself be soothed. And that same refusal is precisely what made the cure so reckless, because a man who will accept no comfort at all will also throw out the ordinary, shared, comforting things that real human values are actually made of. His greatness and his danger are not two traits. They are one trait seen from two sides. You cannot keep the prophet and discard the madman. They were the same man, having the same terrible, clarifying vision. And that, in the end, may be true of every thinker who is worth the trouble, not a verdict to be marked right or wrong, but a wager, a particular way of seeing that lights up some things precisely by casting others into shadow. He was not, of course, the only one who walked up to that edge. Everyone in this film walked up to it. The Stoic stood there and reached for an unshakable calm. The Buddhist stood there and worked to step off the wheel entirely. Dostoevsky looked over and recoiled back toward God, certain that without him everything was permitted. A generation later, Camus looked into the same absurd silence and chose neither despair nor faith, but a kind of stubborn, sunlit revolt. And even Camus, who loved Nietzsche, finally warned that a yes this total, a yes that refuses to say no to anything, can be turned to excuse the very cruelty it should have refused. They all saw the same abyss. What sets Nietzsche apart is that he is the one who would take none of the exits. Not the Stoic's peace, not the Buddhist's release, not Dostoevsky's God, not even Camus's gentler revolt. He insisted on staying out there, undefended, on the open sea, with the horizon wiped away and no chart and no shore, and calling it freedom. That is what makes him the most bracing of all of them to read. It is also what makes him the most dangerous. The two have never once come apart. So maybe the question to ask of him was never, was he right? Maybe that's the wrong instrument altogether, like asking whether a storm is correct. The better question, the one you can actually answer because only you can, is what it does to you to spend time in his company. Whether after 2 hours alone with him in the dark, you feel a little more awake, a little more honest with yourself, a little less able to hide inside a comfortable lie, even though he has handed you nothing comfortable to put in its place. By that measure, the only one really available to you, he isn't a doctrine you accept or reject at all. He's a kind of cold water you can choose to keep throwing on your own face. And that points to the last and deepest thing he has to give, which is not an idea at all, but a way of standing. He spent his whole life refusing to hand anyone an answer. Every move he made ended not in a solution, but in a deeper, stranger question, and he meant it that way. He believed, and this is the quiet ground under everything he wrote, that some questions are not problems to be solved and filed away, but instruments, things you carry, that do their real work on you precisely by staying open. Most of us cannot bear that for long. An open question feels like an itch, an emergency, a thing to be shut at almost any cost. And so we shut it, fast, with a god, or an ideology, or a confident opinion, or a slogan filed down small enough to fit on a wall. He asked the harder thing, to hold the question, to let it stay open and stay honest and keep working on you with no relief of a final answer, and to say yes to your life anyway, in the middle of the not knowing with no guarantee anywhere underneath you. That is not a failure to arrive somewhere. It is a form of courage and a form of intelligence, and it is rarer than genius. I owe you one last piece of honesty because he would have demanded it. Even this, even the man I've shown you across these 2 hours, the gentle, broken, anti-fascist Nietzsche I've spent all this time arguing for, even he is an interpretation. Mine, tonight. The very title of what you've been listening to is a claim about how to read him, and it is no less a reading than the Forger's was, only kinder and, I believe, truer. But there is no the Nietzsche waiting underneath all the versions to be finally uncovered and held up to the light. He taught us that himself. There are only interpretations all the way down, and so the most loyal thing I can do, having pressed one of them on you for 2 hours, is to tell you to take it and then doubt it and go and read him yourself and make him your own. His very last act before the silence closed over him was to sign his name as 2 gods at once, Dionysus and the crucified, the great yes and the great suffering, held together in one broken hand. Maybe that was the whole teaching in the end, not to choose between them, to hold both. So this is where I leave you and where he leaves you too. Not with an answer, with a question and the dark and the sound of your own breathing. You came to him most likely the way nearly everyone does, through a few words on a wall or under a photograph, a stranger you were quoting without ever having met. You can leave him with something else in your hands, a real question, your own now, larger and more open than the certainty you walked in carrying. That alone, trading a borrowed slogan for a question that is genuinely yours, is most of what a mind like his was ever for. You don't have to decide tonight whether he was a prophet or a fool. You don't have to make values out of nothing or pass the demon's test or love the whole of your fate or become anyone other than the person already lying here. Those are the long labors of a life, and they can wait. There is no exam in the morning. Tonight, there is only this room, and the dark and the question settled now at the foot of the bed, no longer clawing to be answered. That was the strange peace underneath all his thunder, the thing the slogans always strip out. Not the peace of holding the answer, the peace of no longer needing it tonight. The question is yours now, completely, and you can take it down with you into sleep, and the sleeping mind will turn it over in its own way, in the dark, without any help from you. In the morning, it will still be here. Or it will have quietly changed shape, the way his questions do. Either way, it was always going to be yours to carry. Let the shoulders come down from where they've drifted. Let the breath go long. There is nothing left to solve tonight and no one keeping score, and the dark, whatever he said about it, is kind. Sleep carries its own answers, or it carries none at all, and that too is a kind of answer. Rest now, the question will keep.